Welcome in to the opening kickoff podcast. Oh, it is great to be back. I got my two guys here with me. We're glad you're listening to us wherever you get your podcasts on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening. We thank you for doing that. And we thank you to those of you that are watching us on YouTube. I will address what is going on for the people that are watching and for the people listening. I have a mask on right now. I will address that in a little bit, but let me introduce my guys who we all took a very nice week off. I think it showed. We've got some energy with us. Let's go co-host number one. He is Peyton Gerard. How you doing, buddy?
It's the beginning of a new season. A lot on the line. It's kind of like, this is it. Like, this or next year's like it. You know what I mean? Like, to go to a serious Super Bowl. We're out with a couple people out of COVID, so I'm nervous. But I feel good. I'm confident about what's going to happen. And it's a week-by-week thing. Got to go 1-0. So I'm feeling good. Feeling okay.
We will discuss all three of our teams that are in the playoffs. We will break down each playoff game, tell you who we think will win, and discuss some of the other moves in the NFL. We have a great guest coming up in a couple minutes that you will hear. We'll dive into the NBA with him. I got to bring in my guy. Brandon Stevens is with us. The enunciation, by the way, that I am putting on this is I'm reminded of when we did our best of series that we put out on social media, the infamous end of the episode when Peyton told us his mom does not like how I pronounce last names. Yes. Well,
it's actually grown to my entire family has now heard the clip. So I think at least they've heard it. So it's really growing. So it's getting some traction.
I am working, and that's why there's the enunciation. My New Year's resolution is to get your last names right. So Peyton Gerard, Brandon Stevens, and Brandon, I did actually go back and listen to what I used.
How do you get Stevens wrong?
It
happens
like
all the time.
It looks like Steffens.
Steffens?
That's
Peyton.
Look, that's crazy.
No, it's more common than you think.
I don't know. I've never heard of a Steffens in my life.
No, me either. But like,
that's not even like I would just assume even if that was like if that was like a V or like anything that close, I would just say Stevens. Like, what's wrong with you, Dave?
That's just what they do, man. That's what they do. I've been Brendan. I've been everything. Brandy. I've been Steffens.
Hold on. Who called you Brandy? That's what that one. I got questions about.
Definitely. There's been so many times.
Calling him giving a pet name.
Yeah, there's been so many times. I mean, I've grown to live with it at this point, right? Like, I think my name is very easy to read. It's easy to spell. There's nothing that should confuse you. Like, it might be one of the more common, 7-letter first names in the world. Like, it's easy. I'm giving it to you on a silver platter. All you got to do is eat it. And some people just make it
really is like astronomically might be like one of the easiest names in like America to say.
Well, let me do this because I get criticized for how I pronounce names, and rightly so. I butcher them. I will freely admit it. You guys have not attempted.
What?
My last name.
Dave Steinwater.
Is it not Steinwater? Like,
it's hard about. Look, I'm impressed. You guys get it. I have been. You think you have been called? I swear, sometimes it was almost like I wasn't even sure if I was pronouncing my last name right because everybody kept saying it wrong. So, bravo to you guys for getting it. Probably isn't the first try because we've had this conversation, but bravo to you because it has been Steinwedel, Steinwedel, Steinvettel. I mean,
I'll be honest though. I definitely, when you put me on the spot when we talked about it the first time, I knew how to say it, but you put me in such a predicament. You're like, nope, you wanted to hear it. I was like, my brain just exploded. I went, nope, not a shot, not a chance. I'm about to do that. So that's why I was like, I can't say this right now. Under pressure, I was not built for it right there. I'm
All
serious. So serious. Just wasn't built for it right there.
We got a lot coming up in this podcast. We got Dan Favale of Bleacher Report is joining us to discuss all things NBA. Really great. Had a lot of fun with that. We will dive into the NFLs. We talked about Wild Card Weekend. What to make of this whole Dolphins and Tua situation going forward and some of the head coaching moves that have been made. I did say at the opening, I wanted to address what's going on with this mask right now. If you're wondering why I don't sound as crisp or you're watching on YouTube, I did test positive for COVID on Friday. You guys obviously knew because you were one of the first people I messaged. I'm okay. I'm getting better. The mask is protecting others that I currently live at home with, but I know my grandparents, a lot of family listens to this pod. I want everyone to know I am okay. I am on the mend. I will be back at it sooner rather than later, but I didn't want anyone to be concerned. I also wanted to take this moment to thank both of you guys for your kind words, and to a lot of people that have reached out. I appreciate all that. I thank you. Instead of sending 10,000 messages when I get healthier, I just figured this is probably the best way to do it. So I thank each and every one of you that have taken the time to check in and make sure I'm doing all right. So I appreciate each and every one of you.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Can you taste and or smell?
Yes. Never lost either one of those. Never lost either one of those. But,
my follow-up question doesn't apply anymore. I reside. I table my spot.
I don't know if I want to know what that follow-up.
Well, everyone who says has gotten it lost taste. So I just got to ask, like, everyone who has it and had that happen. Everyone in the world has probably tasted something that they hate and or done something like drink alcohol, take a shot to see if it what's going on. I was going to ask you what was the thing that you did, because I've seen everyone do it. So I had
ironically didn't have any of that. I had a cold. I had cold symptoms that were actually COVID. So I did have the body aches. The body aches are not fun. You get them, and you know what I'm talking about. They're not fun. To wake up and have your your entire rib cage hurting is a new feeling. That was a new feeling that I'm very glad only happened once during this whole ordeal. But I am okay. Save your well wishes and your prayers for the people that are really struggling with this. I am okay. But let's get that out of the way. Let's talk about our friends at Thrive. Come prop up on Thrive Fantasy this season. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports app for player props. They have eliminated the need to do countless hours of research because they only ask you about the top-tier athletes in a respective sport. In the NFL, choose 10 out of the 20 player prop options to build your lineup. In the NBA, because the NBA, they got weekly contests, choose 5 out of the 10 players to build your prop options to build your lineup. Each prop has a fantasy point total associated with the over/under based on its likelihood to occur. The more points a selection is worth, the riskier it is. Rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. Thrive has awarded over $1.4 million in prizes since launching in 2018, and has $50,000 in guaranteed prizes for the NFL weekly. Use promo code Kickoff when you sign up today, and you will receive an instant $50 bonus on your first deposit of $20 or more. Download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or Play Store by visiting their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and hashtag prop up today. On the other side of this break, Dan Favale of Bleacher Report. Welcome back to the Opening Kickoff podcast. Oh, the first show of the year. Really excited to be talking to our next guest. Dave Stommel, Brandon Stevens is here with me. B, how you doing?
Great, man. Look, the Bills are in the playoffs. I don't think I can accurately describe how excited I am to just the average person out there. You know, like, if you're a Bills fan, you understand how exciting this time is. Just for it to seem like we actually might win a playoff game for the first time in God knows how long.
Let's bring in our great guest. He is an NBA writer for Bleacher Report, co-host of the Hardwood Knocks podcast. He is Dan. I apologize. I should have asked before how to say your last name. I'm going to say Dan Favale is joining us.
It is Favale, but that is the most common.
Favale.
Yeah.
Well, Dan, how are you doing tonight? It's been an interesting time here.
Relative to the world burning around us, I am doing quite well then.
And there's a lot in the NBA that we want to dive into with you. And we'll start. I mean, I feel like the obvious question is everybody talks about it. James Harden and the Houston Rockets. What is your sense? Everybody kind of has a different feeling. We all thought maybe James Harden would go at the beginning of the year. He'd be traded by now. He hasn't been traded. After watching a couple games, what is your sense of this Rocket team with James Harden? And does it feel like we're still going to see Harden move at some point in your eyes?
Yeah, I would be surprised if he isn't moved before the March 25th trade deadline. There have been some nice moments. He's playing well himself, but they look very run-of-the-mill overall. Maybe that changes because they do have John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins back. They were out because of following COVID protocols for a little bit. Maybe it starts to normalize, but when you sort of look at the West, it's at once worse than it was last year, but also more hellacious because there are so many teams that can talk themselves into making a run at the playoffs. It's really only OKC, maybe Memphis at this point that have sort of punted on that since Memphis has the John Morant injury. It's just really a matter of where for Harden. And what I do think is interesting about this season is the trade market for him. I don't think it's become tepid, but it's just when you look at the teams that you can envision giving up the most for him, where it's the Sixers. They don't really have a reason to put Ben Simmons on the table right now because they've been playing so well. The Nets, they can still go all in if they want to and give Houston all the picks plus Karis LeVert and other filler, along with Jared Allen probably. But James Harden is very clearly not what they need. Like, they need another perimeter defensive stopper. And so then you get into the exercise of, okay, well, if not those two, then who is it going to be? He named Milwaukee. It's just not happening. He named Miami. I don't really see a clear path there either. He named Portland. Are they willing to go CJ McCollum, Zach Collins, Anthony Simons, and then every single pick that they could throw in there? And they would have to remove protections on another pick they already owe to Houston. So there are a lot of moving parts. I think how this ultimately ends, now that I'm effectively rambling, is he will be traded by March 25th. I think it ends up being to a team that is not on his sixth destination wish list right now. I just feel like some team is going to get, I don't know if it's the word desperate, or really sense that there's an opening in their conference right now and that having a top 5 player is going to make all the difference in the world. But I feel like that's how this is going to end.
I want to ask you, you brought up the Sixers, and we talk a lot about the 76ers on this podcast. Are you surprised that they're 6-1 playing as good as they are right now, or is this what we expected with Doc Rivers taking over?
I'm not surprised, and a large part of that is because I think, one, the roster just makes so much more sense. Having Danny Green and Seth Curry in the starting lineup, like, it's just, instead of having Al Horford there's just more shooting and ball handling on this roster now. The offense still isn't all the way there, and you can clearly see that, but the roster itself is more sensible. And then when you kind of factor in how they're winning games, they've beaten up on just a ton of not so great opponents, and that you beating the teams that you're supposed to is a big deal. It's something that they struggled to do last year, and the defense has been the best in the league so far. And that's, maybe some of the stuff that they're doing will come down, but that's, if you look at them having Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, this is a roster that feels like it could have the best defense in the league. And so they've done a good job of, limiting opponent opportunities at the rim, which is something they always do a good job of with Joel Embiid on the floor. They're forcing turnovers without at a pretty good rate without fouling a ton. They're taking care of the defensive rebounding. All the sort of easy stuff, the low-hanging fruit on defense, they're taking care of. And aside from that, you have 2 of the best defensive players in the league on your team. So I think are they the best team in the East? I honestly don't know, but I think this start from them is more sustainable than not.
Brandon, hop in here.
Yeah, so I don't know if you've been keeping up with the recent news with the NBA trying to expand, bring the 2 expansion teams to make up for the loss of of COVID. Obviously, they're losing millions and millions of dollars with not having fans in the stadium, limiting traveling, those things. Do you think there's a possibility that we see some very big names, if the NBA were to expand, get moved on to those expansion teams?
I think depending on when it happens, you just have to look at the contracts and, like, what are these contracts that could just age super poorly right now? If it's 2 years down the line, like, could Gordon Hayward end up on an expansion team? Maybe. So I think it depends on when it happens. Certainly where those teams are going to go. I think one of them, given if they want to try and do two teams, one will definitely be in Seattle. Where will the other one be? Will it be Louisville, Vancouver? There's a bunch of different destinations being floated around. And then it also matters, like, where are some of these teams going to be at in their development? Whereas there are, sort of how the Warriors have kind of fallen from a dynasty to what the heck are they? Like, is there another team that's going to fall to where they view their best chance to pivot is to maybe put one of their better players, in the expansion draft, knowing that they're going to get picked, assuming that's how they even, wind up expanding these teams. Like, I don't even know if it's been reported to that extent right now, but I mean, you made the great point of the NBA is clearly going to be worried about its bottom line moving forward, and the expansion fees that would be coming from one, but not just one, but two teams would be financially a great way to hold it over. So I wouldn't really have a feel on who we could see, like, maybe being lopped off those teams. My best advice would be, like, look at some of these longer term deals that were signed over, this past offseason or the one before it. And then if you think expansion is going to happen within 2 years, like, maybe those are the guys, those contracts, they're bigger names, but their contracts aged super poorly. Maybe they're not definitely going to wind up on an expansion team, but perhaps they're not made untouchable if there is in fact an expansion draft.
So in terms of talking about the expansion teams, you mentioned Seattle. I think everybody's on board that Seattle would probably be the one spot that everybody would like to see a franchise go. Dan, we're going to give you the power to be the commissioner. If you had a choice of the other expansion team, where would you put that second team?
If I was going to be super selfish, I would say San Diego, because I would just move there in a heartbeat to try and cover that team. But I think Vancouver would be the play here. Canada's a very good basketball market right now. Just looking at the way that Toronto has sort of rallied around the Raptors over the past, 2 decades, essentially. I think there's still going to be a market for that, like bringing a basketball team back to Vancouver. They've already shown at some point that they can sustain it. And so the NBA, who's obsessed with having this global impact too, like Vancouver's technically a different country. I don't know if what's happening now with the coronavirus pandemic will have turned them off to that idea, just because of all the hoops they had to jump through to get the Raptors to be able to play in Tampa right now. But I would love to see just because I think that's a pretty good basketball market, and knowing what we've seen from the Toronto fans, I think it would be great to see an NBA team land back in Vancouver.
Now, speaking of the Raptors having to play in Tampa Bay, obviously we've been seeing them struggle this season. Do you think that plays a big part in why they're not looking like they were last season and the season before?
I don't know how we will quantify it, but I would think it has to, because I'm sure a lot of these guys are dealing with being without their families, where it's, they're not in the bubble anymore, but are their families with them in Tampa? And then maybe some are in the process of uprooting their families to bring them to Tampa. And then how much sense does that make? Because what if you end up playing in Toronto at some point this season? My guess would be that they don't, but there's that. So how many of these guys have made Toronto home? Where, Kyle Lowry, no, he doesn't live in Toronto as far as I know in the offseason, but he's just been there so long. He has ties to the city. The same thing with Fred VanVleet. So that has to be taking its toll. And then there's also just the fact that maybe people like myself, I'll throw in there, just underestimated what losing both Gasol and Serge Ibaka would do for them. I kind of thought with how injured Gasol was last year, even the flashes he showed defensively, I believe they would be able to overcome it. And then Serge Ibaka, while he became so good while he was in Toronto, I just kind of thought that he would be easier to replicate his value. I mean, I think we're kind of seeing that aside from the shot making that he provided, there was just more decision making on defense and even passing and just feel for the game as his later time in Toronto. Again, never just a great passer, but felt like a better all-around basketball player by the end of his time with the Raptors. That seems to have hurt them. You're dealing with Kyle Lowry being a year older. And then the big one is just Pascal Siakam's slump has been mind-meltingly bad. He's shooting, I think, last time I checked, he's shooting under 40% on layups. And so, I expect some of that to normalize, but this team is definitely shallower than I think we really thought about to begin with. And they still don't have the ability to put a ton of pressure on the rim in the half court. When they're operating outside of transition, it's like it was last season. They're struggling to really be efficient and to get to not just a line, but to get to the basket in general. So short of them pulling off a trade, and they've been mentioned as a dark horse James Harden suitor, we might need to readjust our expectations. I still think they end up being a playoff team unless they hold a fire sale or something, but maybe that fire sale now is in play when just looking at how they started the season. And if we fast forward 4, 5, 10 games or something, and they're still sort of dwindling outside the play-in picture, they might have some pretty tough decisions to make.
Now moving
So,
out west to their previous NBA Finals opponent, the Golden State Warriors. We saw them struggle very early in the season. Obviously missing Draymond Green was a big part of those struggles. I think Steph was trying to. They're still trying to run that motion offense with no Draymond and run it through Wiggins and Oubre, and it just wasn't looking like it could work. But we're now seeing that offense sort of come back together. What do you think the Warriors need to do to keep this on track?
Draymond coming back is going to help a ton. I do think, a lot's been made in recent days of how good they looked when Steph was playing on the ball more. I do think they need to lean into that until these new players get better at sort of reading and reacting, knowing how Steph likes to relocate for threes after he gives up the ball, which means that you have to be quick about screening his guy or your own guy sometimes, depending on what happens there. Maybe that eventually comes with Oubre and Wiggins. I honestly don't know if it ever will. But you have to put the ball in his hands more and maybe even simplify it to where we know the Warriors don't like running pick and rolls, but you have James Wiseman, who's a pick and roll big. Like,
Right.
You need to run that a little bit more. And so I think that's the path to their offense becoming more efficient. Draymond, again, will help them, I think, blend both styles, where it seems like they probably weren't deviating enough from the way Kerr wants to play before Draymond came back, but now they don't necessarily have to deviate a ton because you do have him as that safety blanket. The other thing, though, is they're going to need their supporting cast to start hitting their wide open 3-pointers. Like Kelly Oubre Jr., yeah, he should shoot better in the long run, but he's just been absolutely abysmal on wide open threes. Andrew Wiggins has been so-so. They've had other players, Damian Lee is hitting his wide open threes, but just a lot of other guys on the teams are not. And when you look at this roster, there's just no clear-cut guy that you can point to and say on any given night, he's going to give us reliable 3-point shooting. It's not Wiggins, it's not Oubre, it's not Draymond Green. You can't even put you're not going to put a Damian Lee in that. Michael Mulder is supposed to be a good shooter, but he's just not playing a ton for them right now. And his 3-point splits, at least in the NBA, have been all over the place, though he's shooting well at the moment. For them, it's just, to me, put the ball in Steph's hands more. You're going to have to indulge pick and roll if you want Wiseman to play this huge role. But it is what's going to make or break them is can some of their bigger name supporting cast members shoot the ball better from three. And even someone like who they signed for this reason, Brad Wanamaker, who was a great shooter in Boston, shooting under 19% from three. They're going to need some of these guys, particularly him and Kelly Oubre Jr., to really pick it up from distance to maximize Steph and just give their offense in general more room to operate.
Do you think Kerr would, sort of deviate away from that traditional offense that they've always ran, with the off-ball screens and Steph relocating off the three to more of a pick and roll with him and Wiseman? Because I know when Wiseman was drafted, that was something that I was, most excited to see was the pick and roll with, him and Steph or him and Draymond, just two, very high IQ guys that could set him up very well in those situations.
Yeah, I don't expect him to move away from it yet, but if we get to a point where there are 20 games in the season and just you can't play that way with an Oubre, with a Wiggins, you're going to have to. And maybe we might just see them kind of lean on these, let's call them OG lineups, where you're going to have Kevon Looney and Lee and Draymond
Right.
and Steph, and then a fifth. Most of those guys will then know how to play that way. But at some point, they're not there yet. They just got Draymond Green back, and you have to give Wiggins and Oubre some time. And I'm just naming them because those are probably their two most important players outside of Wiseman,
Absolutely.
Steph, and Green. And even Wiseman has to be thrown into there too. Give them some time. But if we're talking, let's say the end of this month, January, and it's still just not clicking, something's going to have to give. And I think you'll have to indulge just more traditional styles more. And I think the low-hanging fruit there is the pick and roll with James Wiseman. It just makes too much sense because of who he is right now as a player. And he's even shown that he can do some pick and pop. I think he's 4 of 6 on wide open threes so far. And so explore that if your players in question just aren't grasping the nuances of the system that predates them. We're looking that version of the Warriors essentially died almost 2 years ago at this June 2019, whatever it was. So if it's not, again, game 15, game 20 in the season, and they're still struggling overall on offense, I think that's when you really have to recalibrate.
Last thing I want to ask about the Warriors, and then we'll move on. I heard on Ryan Rizzo's podcast talking after Steph had the 62-point game that maybe we underappreciate just how good Steph is. It kind of seemed like the LeBron people didn't want him to be the best basketball player in the world. Everybody kind of seemed ready to bag him and the Warriors. I know it's just 2 games. We're early in the season, but Dan, do you think that Steph Curry is underappreciated by NBA fans?
That's a good question. I might skew toward yes at this point. Look, when they were winning, he was not really underappreciated. Stuff was made about his finals performance in 2016, even though he was really good, whether Kevin Durant was better than him once he signed or more valuable. That was always sort of a debate, but he was essentially the face of the league at some point, and the NBA sort of viewed him as this rating savior when knowing this year that they were going to get him back, that their ratings should improve. And now there's going to be all sorts of noise there because of the pandemic and everything that goes with that. So I don't know that he's always been underappreciated, but I think once he started being put in those conversations of, is he the best player in the league in any given season, the way that Giannis has been the past 2 years, that's when there seemed to be more pushback. And I don't think that people were able to grasp that his impact, just because he's never going to be the defender that a Giannis or a LeBron is. He just doesn't have the physical size. And the way he plays offense, it can in theory be neutralized. If your supporting cast, if you don't have a reliable one around you and you can really just collapse or be physical with Steph, like he's not built like an Adonis like LeBron is. And we've seen even struggles earlier on this season. Like he's going to need at least some room to maneuver. And so if you have terrible players around him or guys aren't hitting any of their shots, high quality looks even that he's creating for them, maybe he'll struggle to lift up a team in the same vein as a LeBron. But I don't know that that's necessarily a knock against him. There's never been anyone like LeBron in the league, and Giannis is totally unprecedented, and he has his own postseason faults. So I do think right now he is underappreciated because maybe the Warriors are never this juggernaut when he's really their only superstar. But when you just look at how he changes the geometry of the floor when he doesn't have the ball, how much attention he has to command from defenses, there's no one in the history of the league that has ever drawn that much attention without the ball. Like that's with him not even having the ball. So he has a form of shot creation that doesn't even involve having the ball in his hands because he's even shown that he'll screen too. So that plus his gravity, it just matters a whole bunch. And it does feel like because we can't necessarily quantify those things or because they're not traditional forms of dominance, that he has been criticized more than some of the other megastars in his position would be.
I want to ask about another Western Conference team. They're behind the Lakers right now. They're 5-2. They're the Phoenix Suns. They go get Chris Paul. Everybody fell in love with them in the bubble. They went unbeaten. Are they for real?
In my opinion, they are. I have them as probably a top 3 contender right now. They've been great on defense, and I think DeAndre Ayton is still playing really well on that end. We're seeing the effects of having Chris Paul. Mikal Bridges would easily be first team all defense for me if we were making those picks right now. Ayton's performance might be something to watch just because his offensive usage is down so much that will he become disenchanted at any point? But he's saying all the right things up until now. And if he's going to keep defending the way that he has been, this team is going to be scary because they haven't reached their peak on offense yet. They're middle of the road in efficiency. They're still doing a lot of my turn, your turn stuff with Devin Booker and Chris Paul. I think they have the slowest average possession time in the NBA. So that's how at least I look at measuring pace, is how long their possessions are taking, and no team is burning the clock more on those. That might change, but it also prepares them to play in the postseason when the pace of play does tend to slow down and you need to win out those grimy possessions. And I also think by that point, you'll have better chemistry on offense between Booker and Paul, and you'll also be playing them together more because Monty Williams so far has done a great job of staggering them since their backup playmaking position is just so spotty.
Welcome back to the Opening Kickoff Podcast. Dave Stum, Little Peyton Gerard, Brandon Stevens. Our thanks to Dan Favale of Bleacher Report, the Hard Knocks podcast, for joining us and diving into a lot of the NBA topics with us. Now it is time to get into the NFL. We are at the postseason. All three of our teams are in the postseason. We get to talk about each one of them, but first we want to talk about some stuff about teams that aren't in the playoffs. And I want to start with this because this has been one that's kind of surprised me in terms of the narrative here. The Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa didn't end very well with Buffalo. We weren't on, of course, the week prior when they went to the bullpen and brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick to help beat the Las Vegas Raiders.
By the way, I love that move. I love that. I wish, imagine if they changed the NFL game where, you just had a closer, right? What if you sign Tom Brady next year and you literally just hire him for the last 4 minutes of the game?
That's assuming though that you're in the game late though. But
I know, but think about it. You have the closer. That's crazy.
It's wild. But now the narrative seems to be that is Tua even going to be the starter next year? And should the Dolphins take somebody at 3, the pick that they have from the Laramie Tunsil trade? Thank you, Bill O'Brien, for screwing over Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. Something else we'll talk about in a little bit. But are we too quick to judge here on Tua?
I mean, I've seen some pretty tough arguments, both ways, right? Tua's I think he's a very good player. I don't think he's a bust. I think that their OC resigned today. Maybe they need to bring in someone else that can help him out, fit more whatever he needs to find that place out. If they can get Devontae Smith, maybe that connection can help him out, make him feel more comfortable. I don't know. I mean, at times he looked amazing, and other times he just looked like he was so lost. But then, the worst one I saw was have we been all bamboozled by Tua? And it was these were all of his receivers at Alabama. And it's Jerry Jeudy, Waddle, Smith, Henry Ruggs.
It's your typical Alabama quarterback.
I know, but you saw the picture of it, and it was just one, it's just absurd to look at a picture of a wide receiver room with Waddle, Smith, Ruggs, Jeudy, and
right.
It's mind blowing to think about. Holy shit, this is all in one team at one time. But, I don't know. I think it's he obviously made big-time plays. So it's I think, getting rid of him is kind of an aggressive move unless you're getting, Justin Fields or you're getting a quarterback that is going to win you games. Not just – and, if you're making this move, it's got to get you, not just past in the playoffs. It's got to get you deep in the playoffs. You know what I mean? It can't just be we're going to trade him and then hope to make the playoffs. It's got to be all in. You know what I mean? If that's the move you're making, it's going to be an aggressive one. So I don't know. I don't think it's it's not the situation Arizona had with Josh Rosen and Kyler Murray. It's not that. That's an extreme where they drafted back-to-back quarterbacks. He is much leaps and bounds better than that. So I don't want to talk bad about Tua. I think he still has a very bright future. So I think he stays.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's how long are we going to get this guy to develop? I mean, I know it's the era that we live in. We live in the microwave era. Everybody wants things, immediately. We're here for the end result, not for the process. And it's just one of those things where it's how long are you going to get these guys to develop? You're trying to write this guy off after his rookie season. It's how many other people in history could you have done that to that turned out to be, decent, if not better than decent, players in any sport?
I think the Herbert thing, really, makes people look at it differently, though.
Oh, yeah.
And, they're shit, he looks so good. And even Joe Burrow looked really good. He looked amazing, too. For a period,
I think nobody any favors.
I think Justin Jefferson wins Rookie of the Year, in my opinion, because he broke, Herbert broke rookie records. He broke Randy Moss's rookie record. You see what I'm saying? He broke a Hall of Famer's rookie record. And, like, Justin Herbert beat Baker Mayfield's record, which I guess used to be Peyton Manning's. But, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, I think they're just different levels to that. And, like, I don't know. They weren't the best team either, but he still did it, and, like, it's wild.
I think you make a good point in the fact that we're comparing him to Herbert and Burrow with what they did, and Tua didn't exactly light it up, didn't have as many wow plays. Now, there are questions about Tua that you can have, but I kind of think it's the same conversation we had about Lamar Jackson a couple years ago, is we're so ready to make that blanket statement on it and be like, he's great, he's going to be the quarterback that leads Miami to multiple Super Bowls, or we're ready to say, no, we're done. I'm calling it. He's a fraud. I mean, look, there are questions to me about the arm strength. I'm not sure his arm is as strong as a Herbert or a Burrow, but that's not me. That's not me sitting here saying, well, his out route ball flutters, so he can't make it as a pro quarterback. That's not what I'm saying. There are questions to be had, but I think that with the right pieces, the right scheme, you can work with that. Kind of like what you see the Saints doing with Drew Brees, where they've kind of fixed things to help Drew this year because we know the arm strength really isn't what it was, but he's still able to get occasionally deep down the field. You can do that with Tua to make up for what we are starting to see might be a deficiency in his game. But,
yeah,
I mean, 8 games is way too early to be sitting here looking at him going, that's it. He's not going to be it. Let's go draft another quarterback.
Do you think he throws a better ball than Lamar right now? I think he throws. I think he throws a better ball. But the thing is, he throws a better ball. He doesn't take many chances at all.
I agree with that. I think Tua looks and plays a lot like Drew Brees right now. Very conservative. Yeah. Checkdowns are his best friend. I think you need to get him in a system where he's comfortable. I think the other thing is, let's see what happens with a full offseason. Because, again, we got wowed with Burrow and Herbert, who had just natural God-gifted ability in their arms to make plays. Tua was coming off the hip. We now know arm strength is not top-notch. It's still there, but it's not, wow, he's going to drop 85-yard bombs on you and the ball's going to be picture-perfect every time. But I think the Lamar Jackson is a perfect comparison because we bagged Lamar for his throwing ability, and I think it's gotten better. Now, I still agree with you. I think Tua throws the better of the deep balls. I think Tua throws a better ball. It looks clean coming out more often, but I do think Lamar has more arm strength.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Tua. He has a little more zip in that.
The accuracy is the issue with Lamar, really, honestly.
Yeah,
but
and that's
no, I was saying, like, I think the reason there's so much pressure on this, and it's literally, I think, the only reason is because everyone knows how good the Dolphins' defense is. So I think that's where Brian Flores feels that pressure, where he knows the defense can play. Now, the Bills game, like, I honestly don't know how that all happened. Like, I was shocked that Brian Flores, like, let that happen. It was no matter how bad Tua was playing, I didn't think, like, I mean, I even look back when they played Denver, like, they still only gave up 20 points. You know what I mean? Like, I was shocked. They let Matt Barkley tear it up. Like, I mean, I don't know. It was kind of just such a demoralizing loss for them.
Let's move on and talk about the coaching carousel. 6 job openings right now. We have the Texans, the Lions, the Falcons, Chargers, Jets, and I'm missing one. Jaguars. Thank you, Brandon. Those are the job openings. We've heard so many. Urban Meyer might be the Jaguars head coach. He's the favorite. We've heard the usual suspects. Eric Bieniemy, this is his year. Ramon Saleh.
Definitely his year. This is
Robert Saleh, excuse me, not Ramon. Don Martindale, the Raven defensive coordinator. I mean, with Arthur Smith, the OC of the Titans. I'll ask you guys, Brandon, I'll start with you. Out of all the job openings, which one do you, if you were a potential head coach, would be the most intriguing to you?
So I'm going to go ahead and say Jacksonville, and here's why. I think the going to a team who has a high draft pick. I think the young talent on that team is good. They just need a coach that's going to be able to bring out the best in them. I mean, Doug Marrone was there being a sort of just a talking head for years. When they played in the AFC Championship a couple years ago, that team obviously doesn't look the same way now, but we saw what they were able to do with Doug Marrone, and I think if you're able to bring in, a decent head coach, just change that culture a little bit, maybe, add a couple, big name players in free agency, but just the things that they have there already. You have Chark, you have James Robinson still there. You got Miles Jack, who had a phenomenal year this season. It's just like, if you can build on those things, I think you have yourself a I don't want to say a winning football team, but definitely better than they looked this last season.
Peyton, same question to you. Most attractive.
Yeah, like I would agree just because like the whole Trevor Lawrence thing. Like I think Eric Bieniemy, like he would be like very. I mean, it would be probably his like a good spot for him. You're getting a rookie quarterback. You get to mold him. You get to start the offense like all over how you want it. That kind of thing. It can become more attractive to go down there and play because it is Florida. At the end of the day, I'll go different though. I'll just for the sake of like the argument, like I don't know why if you're like an offensive mind. I don't know why you wouldn't want to be partnered with Deshaun Watson in Houston. Obviously, there's going to be issues, and I don't think anybody will hold you accountable because of how Bill O'Brien set up, you guys basically for failure with the draft. But I think you have players in place like that you could be competitive. And I mean, any game with Deshaun Watson, shit, you could be competitive in every game. So I think there's just a couple things like. Now I saw like our guest, one of our good guests, Quincy Avery, was kind of questioning, saying like, why Joe Brady? Why is everyone so hot on him? Because I heard and our other guest, Ben Albright, was reporting that he nailed his interview, but people were like still like suspect of it because they don't know what he'd be like as a head coach. I don't know either. Like I kind of think right now like he's just an offensive mind. I don't know what that looks like as a head coach because like he's never really had that experience, I guess you'd say, at any level, where some of these other guys who get jobs, like I feel like they've been a head coach at least at some point. Maybe he has been. I'm sure there's probably some college or something or whatever. But it's like, is he that what you want to do, or is it that the McVays of the world, the Shanahans, like, is that what you feel like you have to do? You know what I mean? Like, does everyone feel like they need to make that kind of a move? Because the other side of it, that team that felt like they needed to make it was Cliff Kingsbury. And, I mean, he hasn't panned out yet. They didn't make the playoffs. They blew it. I mean, I watched them literally like – I know Kyler Murray was hurt and they didn't play him. And then he went in like the fourth quarter, which like made no sense. Where like if he could play, like even on one leg, why were you not putting him out there until the fourth quarter? It was so late in the game already. Like, I guarantee you Kyler Murray could have thrown better balls than I don't even know who that backup was, honestly. It's like shit like that. Like, you don't want that to be your narrative. You don't want to have the Cliff Kingsbury. You want the McVay. And I mean, I don't know if there is another one because of how like detail oriented it is, how cracked out he is all the time. So I would say Houston just because of Deshaun Watson and you know what you're going to get with him week in and week out. It's more about like that defense. But and I think like you'll get a little leeway with like the owners and stuff because they know how bad Bill O'Brien fucked them all over.
So I'll go opposite of both of you guys. I think the easy answer is everybody's going to tell you it's probably the Chargers with Justin Herbert and all the weapons that they have that are under contract. You still have Joey Bosa, Derwin James on defense, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams.
A lot of cap space.
A lot of cap space. I'm going to make the argument that I think the Jets is a real attractive opening.
I hate
because
that. I hate that.
Because Joe Douglas, I think, is the right GM for that team. He had a really good draft if you look at the guys that they took. Outside of Denzel Mims, who had a rough year because of injuries and some off the field stuff, you're gonna get a decision on your quarterback. You have a lot of draft capital, and you have a lot of cap space. So you have with the right GM, and I think in Joe Douglas, you have all the makings to really start to build your foundation in a hurry with the guys you can sign, and then with the at least 10 picks you have in the draft. I think the Jets are the attractive place, with my only qualification being, if you're the coach, you're going to have to make your decision on Sam Darnold right away. And I think your decision is, do I like him? Do I want to give him that extra year because we don't have to pick his fifth-year option up? Do I like him? Do I go 1 year and try to trade that number 2 pick, get even more draft picks? Or do I say, you know what? Let's get rid of him, and I'm going to go and draft my quarterback with that 2nd overall pick. That's where, if I'm the Jets, I have that flexibility if I'm the coach to be like, okay, I can either go with Sam Darnold, maybe I've liked what I've seen, or you know what? I can go get my quarterback because we have the number 2 overall pick, and we can still address a lot of the issues on this team with the money and with all the draft pick capital that we have. I think the Jets are a real attractive place, and it's helped because I think Joe Douglas is the right guy to lead that Jet team.
But I just think if it isn't Eric Bieniemy, like, I just don't think there's a good coach for the Ben. Like, I just don't. Like, you need somebody to come in and help. If you help Darnold, or I don't know, what pick do they have? They have 2.
They have 2.
Yeah.